Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the place that takes that pile of sources and turns it into, well, hopefully, crystal clear knowledge for you.
That's the goal.
And today, we're getting into something really fundamental, a mechanism that's kind of undermining trust in large language models, AI hallucinations.
A big one.
Yeah, and you've asked for this, a solid, foundational primer. It feels like a necessary step before we can really get into the weeds of why this stuff keeps happening.
Absolutely. You need the basics first.
So we've got the introductory sources right here, aiming to set that baseline.
Good.
Our mission today, let's try and pin down precisely what AI hallucinations are, then figure out how they actually show up, how they manifest, and finally establish the major challenges they're throwing up really across any sector using AI.
It's pretty pervasive.
Totally. And getting this clear understanding is like the essential launch pad for tackling those deeper causes later on. Okay, let's unpack this.
Okay. Perfect place to start. Because the term hallucination itself, it can be a bit misleading, can it?
Yeah, it sounds like the AI is dreaming or something.
Exactly. We're not talking about some, existential crisis inside the machine. Really, we're referring to these instances where the AI generates information that's, well, factually incorrect.
Okay.
Or maybe just nonsensical. Or sometimes it's just not faithful to the input data it was trained on, or maybe the data you gave it in a specific prompt.
Right. But what's the critical bit here? It's not just about being wrong, is it? Like, simple errors happen all the time.
No, not at all. A simple error, you can usually spot it. The defining thing about a hallucination is that this incorrect information, it's delivered with absolute certainty. And stylistic smoothness. It sounds just like factual truth.
So it sounds perfectly plausible, authoritative even.
Exactly, making it almost impossible to tell apart from correct info, at least, on first glance.
That paradox, the high confidence, hiding the factual errors, it really is the core of it, isn't it?
It is.
When you think about it, it's kind of like having, say, a really brilliant student in a high-stakes meeting. They give the statistical report, and it's structurally perfect, great vocabulary, perfect formatting.
Looks sharp.
Yeah, but the actual data points, completely fabricated, just made up. Yeah. And it's the sheer quality of the delivery that masks the fundamental error.
That's a great analogy, because if the AI output was obviously broken or grammatically messy, we'd just ignore it.
Right, you dismiss it immediately.
It's that combination, the complete coherence on the surface and the total factual divergence underneath, that makes these errors so insidious, so tricky to manage.
It creates a sort of cognitive disconnect for the person using it, I imagine.
Definitely.
Okay, so if the definition is basically plausible fabrication delivered with high confidence,
right?
How do we, the users, actually run into this? When we look at the output, what are the clear signs that a system might be, hallucinating?
Yeah, how does it manifest? Well, the manifestations are often quite specific, especially in systems that are, designed to cite sources or summarize things.
Okay.
Probably the most common observable result is the generation of invented citations.
Invented.
Yeah. The model just spits out a specific author, a specific article title, maybe a journal name, a publication date, and when you actually try to look it up, the source just doesn't exist, vanished into thin air.
Wow.
We also see fabricated quotes pretty often.
Oh, so?
Well, the AI might attribute specific words or definitive statements to real people, public figures, historical documents, whatever.
Right.
But then you go check the original source, the actual document or speech, and that language, that statement, it's just not there, nowhere to be found.
That's terrifyingly precise.
Yeah.
So it's not just rambling nonsense. It's actually building this convincing structure of evidence. It's completely baseless underneath. I have to ask this, though. When they make up a citation, are they just inventing random names? Or is it more sophisticated, like mixing real journal names with fake authors? That would make checking even harder.
That's a really crucial point. And the sources suggest it's often that sophisticated mashup.
Okay.
They tend to follow, established naming conventions. They'll use common, real academic structures like Journal of Applied, whatever.
Right.
But then attach a non-existent volume number or maybe synthesize an author's name that just sounds plausible for that field.
Because that's what they're good at. Linguistic probability.
That's exactly it. They're predicting the most likely sequence of words that looks like a citation. They're not actually retrieving a fact from some knowledge base.
So that structural accuracy is the real deception.
Yes.
The framework of the output looks totally fine. The quotes are in quotes, the conclusion follows the intro, the citations might be formatted perfectly in MLA or APA.
Looks textbook perfect.
But like you said, the linguistic scaffolding is solid, while the underlying facts are just air.
Precisely. Empty structure.
Okay, so we've kind of pinned down the what the definition and the how it appears. Now let's shift to the practical side.
Yeah.
Why do these plausible lies pose such a, well, severe and systemic challenge when we try to use AI?
Right, the so what question.
Yeah, we're spending time on this because the consequences are way bigger than just being annoyed, right?
Yeah.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
It really does. The challenge, fundamentally, it boils down to trust erosion.
Okay.
And as a result, utility erosion. If you can't trust the output to be factually accurate, then the whole core value of using the AI, which is usually speed, automation, that kind of thing, it just collapses.
Makes sense.
Think about putting these things into critical, high-stakes areas, like legal research.
Yeah.
If an AI generates a legal brief, but it fabricates precedent, it invents a case ruling that never actually happened.
Oh, boy.
The consequences are immediate, they're severe. It could mean sanctions, major liability for the law firm or the lawyer using it. Factual accuracy isn't just nice to have there, it's an absolute necessity.
Or think about medicine.
Yeah.
The stakes are arguably even higher.
Absolutely.
A hallucination in, say, a diagnostic summary. It could invent some spurious link between a patient's symptoms and some rare disease.
Right.
Sending the medical team down a rabbit hole that's potentially harmful or at least incredibly costly and time-consuming.
Exactly. The confidence level of the machine in those cases, it becomes inversely related to the user's safety. When the AI is super confident but factually wrong, especially in a critical application, it just injects systemic risk into the whole process.
And it forces this really debilitating shift in the human workflow, too.
Yeah.
That, I think, might be the most insidious challenge.
How so?
Well, the AI promises efficiency, right? Speed things up. But then, if it requires the human user to spend even more time verifying every single claim, every citation, every statistic, you haven't actually gained any efficiency at all. You've potentially lost time.
You've basically just created a mandatory high-stakes verification job.
Exactly.
The user stops being someone benefiting from automation and becomes essentially an intensive fact-checker for the machine.
Yeah, you're auditing the AI.
Precisely. The human is forced into that auditing role, and that completely undermines the whole premise of using AI as a shortcut or an aid. It actually slows down critical workflows because the cost of not auditing could be, catastrophic failure.
That heavy auditing burden is the real efficiency killer, and understanding that impact the loss of trust, the need for mandatory human oversight, it really underscores why we absolutely have to address the underlying causes.
Couldn't agree more.
So let's move now to kind of structure the mechanics of why this happens. The sources we looked at really emphasize this structural framework as the next layer of learning, right?
That's right. When researchers dig into the root causes, they generally break them down into two distinct major categories. And having this kind of roadmap helps manage the complexity. It stops us from just chasing symptoms instead of getting to the actual causes.
So what's the first category?
The first category is what they call data perspectives. This relates entirely to the input material, the gigantic data sets these models are trained on.
The training data itself.
Exactly. If that training data is noisy, if it's contradictory, if it contains factual errors itself, or even if the distribution of information is really uneven, the model basically internalizes all that uncertainty. So when it gets a prompt where it doesn't have a clear, clean answer from its training,
that guesses.
It sort of resolves that uncertainty by filling in the gaps predictively. And that predictive fill-in often results in a hallucination.
So it's kind of like garbage in, garbage out, but on this massive statistical scale. If the data going in is messy, the model learns to output plausible messes.
A plausible mess is a good way to put it, yeah. The model doesn't know what's true. It only knows what words are statistically likely to follow other words based on that huge, often imperfect training set.
Okay, that's data perspectives. And the second category, that focuses less on the food the model ate and more on its internal digestive system, the architecture.
Exactly. That's a good way to think about it. The second category is model perspectives. These causes are about the internal structure of the AI itself.
Like how it works inside.
Yeah, how it processes information, its specific operational mechanisms, the fundamental limitations baked into its mathematical structures, even specific design choices like decoding strategies, how it picks the next word.
Okay. Give me an example within model perspectives.
Well, for instance, these models are fundamentally designed for prediction, right? Generating the next most statistically probable word or token.
Right.
They're not necessarily designed for retrieval, like accessing a specific verifiable fact from a database.
That's a key difference.
It is. And this design tension means that when the model prioritizes that statistical smoothness, making the sentence flow well over factual grounding, well, a hallucination can be the natural result of its own architecture, just doing what it was designed to do.
So the model perspective suggests that even if you had perfectly clean, flawless data,
Uh-huh.
the underlying mechanism itself might still be prone to this kind of generative leap,
Uh-huh.
just because it's built for creative sequencing rather than pure factual recall.
That is the fundamental insight, yes. And this is precisely why getting a solid grip on the definition, understanding how it manifests, and really grasping the challenge why that's the essential foundational knowledge.
It's a base layer.
It is. Once you have this base, then you can effectively start to analyze how those deeper data causes and model causes specifically contribute to this whole crisis of trustworthiness that we're facing with AI.
That provides a very clear roadmap for learning, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, let's bring it all back home for you, the listener. The essential takeaways from this deep dive, let's crystallize them. First, we established that AI hallucinations are these plausible, high-confidence, factual errors. They sound right, but they're not.
Right. Plausible, but wrong.
Second, we detailed how they appear deceptively plausible things, like invented citations, fabricated quotes, that structural illusion.
The convincing fakes.
And third, we established why they pose such a critical challenge. Primarily, it's by eroding trustworthiness, especially in critical applications, and by forcing users like you into that mandatory, time-consuming, high-stakes human auditing role.
Undermining the whole point sometimes.
Exactly.
And, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the whole widespread issue of AI hallucinations, it really forces us to kind of abandon the idea that machine-generated knowledge is inherently certain or true.
Yeah, that's a big shift in thinking.
It is. These systems are incredibly powerful pattern matchers, yes. They're designed to predict the most likely word sequence in response to your prompt. But that sequence might be entirely disconnected from the most factual word sequence.
That distinction is the critical gap.
It's everything.
Which leads us nicely into a final provocative thought for you to carry forward. As you start thinking about exploring those two causal buckets we just mentioned, the data and the model perspectives.
Yeah.
If the problem stems from these inherent limitations, both in the training material and in the mathematical architecture that's designed for creative prediction, the fundamental question you have to explore is this. Can we ever truly and fully eliminate hallucinations? Can we make AI factually perfect? Or are they maybe an inherent unfixable trade-off in any system that's built primarily for this kind of powerful predictive generation rather than pure factual recall?
That's the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is. Something for you to consider as you dive deeper into the mechanics of trying to mitigate those causes.